Hi there, good evening. Thanks for joining me in this fresh edition of the program, The Insight, on Equinox Television. Tonight we shall be having an actor who has been on the ground as far as the Anglophone crisis is concerned. From the start of the Anglophone crisis till date, he is an actor who has been on the ground. He is a legal mind. Tonight we shall be having the lead lawyer for the victims as far as the Anglophone crisis is concerned, the victims, not those who have been arrested. We shall be looking at some of the victims who incurred injuries during the protests, a series of protests that took place in the two English-speaking regions of the country. My guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is a member of the Cameroon Bar Association. Join me and my guests right ahead. My guest tonight is Senior Barrister Achu Julius. Barrister, good evening.
Good evening, Hanson. Good evening, televiewers. The pleasure is mine to be here today with you.
It's a big pleasure having you at the time when the Anglophone crisis persists. You are somebody who has been on the ground from the start of the Anglophone crisis. You are the lead lawyer for the victims. Like I said in the introduction, the victims, not those who have been arrested, those who incurred some injuries and some loss as far as the Anglophone crisis is concerned. Now, before we go into the subject matter, what becomes of the case against the bishops of the northwest and the southwest regions of Cameroon?
You know, the issue of the bishops had to do with the fact that some of us thought it was not right that in a political situation like ours, kids should be those who suffer or to bear the brunt. We had to fight to justify the fact that parents cannot pay school fee for their kids. They're not given the education they're supposed to be given, and at the same time, they're not being reimbursed the money they paid for. So what was the reason collecting the money? So I'm sure reason has come to play, and I strongly believe that the mere fact that schools are now open and some kids are now attending school, there is just no raison d'etre to continue the matter. And owing to the fact that the state filed a nolle prosequi, which is arrest prosecution. Yes. We thought that we, the civil claimants, should equally withdraw. And we withdrew as a consequence.
Without having the money you were asking for?
You know, it's not, when they ask something, you know, it's difficult to get everything they ask for. At least the schools are open, and some kids can still go to school, which is very important to me, to some of us.
Now, Senior Barrister Achu Julius, if you are here with me today, you always say you thank God because your life has always been on the line. According to what we've been seeing on social media today, many are seeing you as a black leg in the Anglophone crisis, but you say you are doing your job as a lawyer, as a legal mind. Now, what becomes of the case pitting the Anglophones who have been arrested and the persons you are representing? You are the lead legal mind, legal representative for some of the victims.
Are you talking about the matter that witnessed the filing, the arresting of prosecution by following the instructions of the head of state?
Yes.
Okay. The matter came up on the 26th in Yaoundé, and it was adjourned because some of our witnesses didn't come to court. Because normally, at this stage of the case, it is expected that the state prosecutor should bring witnesses to be examined by both parties. That is the lawyers for the victims, the lawyers for the accused, and as well as the state represented by the government commissioner. So as those witnesses were there, the case couldn't take off. But there was just one witness who was actually heard, and the matter was adjourned to the 30th of November for the hearing to continue. So we hope that by then the state will be capable of bringing up the witnesses to be heard in court.
Now tell us, how has it been 1 year or now since the Anglophone crisis started? How has it been with you supporting the people on the other side, let me put it this way, because that is what many are putting on social media, that they are supporting the oppressor and the oppressed are there. They don't have people who will support them.
I strongly believe that those who usually go on social media to listen to things or to hear things or to read about things which cannot be verified always get it wrong. Don't forget that I'm a lawyer, and a lawyer doesn't go to court if he doesn't have a client. In this crisis, there are some people that have suffered loss. The hospital was burnt in Bamenda. There's a lady who was burnt because of wearing a CPDM uniform. There's a young lady who was pushed from a second floor in Limbe that had her spinal cord broken. Up to right to date, she's a vegetable. She just can't move because when your spinal cord is touched, there's no way you can live a normal life. There's a gendarme officer whose ear was cut. There's another one who was wounded on the leg. There's the vehicle of the Legion commander that was broken into pieces by an elite crowd. There is the young lady, the famous young lady whose hand was cut because she was going to read in school. Those people have to be defended too. When I'm doing the role, I'm taking my role as a lawyer, you can call me whatever name you like to call, but I know where my right starts and where it ends. I've never been for an oppressor. And you see, when you use that term oppressor, it's just the way you look at it. It's for what angle you're looking at it. Who is the oppressor, who is the oppressor, who is suffering, who is suffering, and so on and so forth. But everybody should know that as a lawyer, everybody has a right. Every lawyer has a right to defend any person insofar as his or her conviction is clear about it. And every victim or every accused person or everybody who goes to court has a right to a lawyer. It is a constitutional right and nobody can take it away. Nobody can stop me from what I'm doing because I believe what I'm doing is right. It's not because some people state that there are no other people, there's some other person didn't suffer. It's not because of what went on. They never asked for it too. So you have a right for defense, and I'm defending those victims. Why it pleases some people or not.
Now, how has life been? I'm saying this because I know there have been death threats on your life. How has it been like within this 1 year, past 1 year?
You see, there are some people who do politics and do things like that with a lot of bitterness. Meanwhile, we're in a democracy. I'm not bound to accept what you tell me. You are not bound to accept what I tell you. But I have a right to say what I want to say, and you have a right to say what you want to say. But those who threaten to kill me, I got balls too. When you come to kill me, be ready because I'm not a child. But you see, I'm not scared of anything because my conscience is clear and I know I'm doing things the right way. I've never hurt anybody. I've never asked for what is going on. I'm just barely defending people I have to defend. Those who threaten that what I'm doing, I'm a black leg or call me whatever name, that is their problem. They have a problem I don't have. Because if you think that I'm doing something which hurts you, it is you. I don't have a problem. But I don't see how defending victims of a problem, of an issue, should be hurting somebody. Do we mean that those victims should stay without being defended? No, that is not right. Everybody has right. But you see, but me personally, as I say, I'm not scared of what I'm doing because I sworn in to become a lawyer. So I know the risk of being a lawyer, and I'm ready to stand it. But it's not because somebody says steady you can't kill me that I was scared my life. I don't do my job because I'm doing my job normally. I'm living normally.
All right, Barrister. Now let's look at the release by the Secretary General, the President of the Republic, on orders from the Head of State, Paul Biya, who asked that all those arrested should be released, but not all were released. As a legal mind, how did you interpret this?
You know, every legal document has a possibility of so many interpretations. I remember that I used to have a history teacher in secondary school who said there are so many ways of catching a rat. You can go by the hand, you can go by the head, you can go by the tail, you can go by the whatever. You see, so any legal document, especially something that has to do with issues which are controversial, is open for a lot of interpretation and misinterpretation. What I read about the document was directives given by the Secretary General to a minister following the instructions of the Head of State. Normally, that document is addressed to somebody. So if that person has an issue with that document, he has to go back to where the instructions were given to find out that what do you mean. And it is when it is being clarified that he comes back and says, okay, this is what I'm going to do following this document. And as of date, the Minister of Defense, the Minister Delegate in charge of Defense, gave instructions to the state prosecutor, the government commissioner, to release a list of persons, excluding some others, because the instructions that were given were normally followed up by clarifications from the powers that be.
So that one was a verbal clarification, not a written one.
Oh, it doesn't even need to be written, because written is just overdoing it. It can even just be a phone call, because the law didn't say how it's supposed to be presented. It can be instructions by phone call or by internet communication or by telegraph or by anything. So the method which instructions are received depends on the individuals involved. When I give instructions to you, how can some other person interpret it best than you who gave the instructions? I thought, for me, those who doubted or had problems with instructions should have gone for interpretation of their instructions, should have gone to meet the person who gave instructions to know better what he wanted, what he meant. Because, for example, laws that are voted from the parliament, at times we lawyers seek for interpretation of that law to give it some sense, to find out what the legislator was thinking in his head before passing that law through parliament. So it has to go through the same process. If you saw instructions from somebody and you think that there's a problem with interpretation, go to that person. It's not even for the courts to find out, because once the arrest prosecutions, when the government or whoever wants to arrest prosecution through the procedure no procedure, it doesn't consult the courts, it doesn't consult the judges. It is meant for the consumption of the government commissioner, like in this case. So the government commissioner had his I'm sure got his interpretation and came to court and applied for those who were to be released, and they were released automatically.
Okay.
That's what happened.
All right. Now, the Anglophone crisis is 1 year on. Senior Barrister Achu Julius, you have been at the forefront of this crisis. Not saying you have been perpetrating it. You have witnessed it. You have been into action. School is yet to resume effectively. Courts are yet to resume effectively. A call over in Mehmet Division by about 10 lawyers. About 80 of them came back and said the procedures were not respected. A call over in Fako Division equally. What explains this? Despite all the efforts made by the government and even by people like you, because despite the fact that you are a legal mind, you have always been also you are a proponent for national unity. What explains the fact?
What explains the fact is divergent views when it comes to national issues. Some lawyers think it is right for them to go to court, and some think, no, it's not correct for them to go to court. We should respect each other's opinion. But the worst thing is that don't stop me from going to court if I want to go to court. Or don't force me to go to court if I don't want to go to court. A lawyer leaves because he goes to court. Because let's not forget, a lawyer is honored. Whenever you go to court, you are paid a fee and things like that. How do you expect to continue exercising that duty if you don't go to court? Well, they say in the Anglophone zone, they act as a notary public. So to me, it doesn't make sense that you go and sit in your chambers, you sell, you attest to the sale, you authenticate the sale of land, you are doing work in chambers, you are functioning in chambers, and you refuse to come to court to defend the common man. Because most often than not, we defend the common man in court. Because most of them can only afford to have a proper defense. So you see, most lawyers go to court and do pro bono work to help the common man. And the only way to do that, as I say, is going to court. If you decide not to go to court, fine, it is your decision. Nobody should force you to go to court. If you want to go to court, fine, it's a decision. Nobody should force you to stop going to court. And so the problem comes in when you want to infringe on some other person's right. Some say they want a call over, some say they don't want. It's not a matter of majority. It's not a matter of how many who want it or who don't want it. It's a matter of, is it good? Who thinks it's good? Who thinks it's bad? Can you imagine that for close to 1 year, litigants are not being well defended in the former West Cameroon, in the Anglophone part of the country? Mm-hmm. They have a problem because some lawyers don't go to court. I don't want to share the view of those who say it's because they don't even have cases. But come in, if the court has to function, the lawyer is part of it, because you have the bench, the bar, the administrative office and the state. Those components have to be together for a court to function. So, but you see, lawyers, as I say, we are slaves to our opinion. When once we believe that this is our direction, nobody can actually change us until we see reason why to change. Those who don't see reason will stay where they are. Those who see reason will change. It's just normal. That's how we are.
Okay. Now, what about school yet to resume effectively?
You know,
even though you said the case pitting the Anglophone bishops, that's the bishops in the two English-speaking regions of Cameroon, was dropped because there was some degree of school resumption. But today we see that it's not effective, Barrister.
No, the first problem is that you should understand that most Francophones who are sending their kids to the Anglophone zone, they've withdrawn all their kids and they're now schooling in the Francophone zone. That's the first problem. Second problem, most Anglophones who can afford it have withdrawn their kids and they're now studying in the Francophone zone. So those schools who are open now, they have a problem. Many students don't come because the students are already schooling in the Francophone zone. How can you pay fees in the Francophone zone and you want that your kids to come back to where it was before and to pay fees again? So you're going to pay fees the third time. It's going to be very costly. Because the first time you paid, there was no school. Now you move the kids and bring it to the Francophone zone. You've paid fees again. Okay, how can you go back down to the school when because they were open and though open late, they were open. They are now open. How can you go back in and pay another set of fees for the third time? It's going to be very costly for anybody. And any reasonable person won't do that. And that should explain why there's this timidity. It's timid. I know schools like St. Beats used to be full. But I'm very certain you go there now, it will not be the same. St. Augustine's, especially those schools further from Bamenda. But there are many more in schools in Bamenda town because most parents feel more secure in Bamenda town than in those schools further up in the northwest, for example. I don't know much about the southwest. I didn't go around. I never went around to find out. But I know some schools in the northwest have taken off, and schools that are going on normally. That I know. But at the same time, there are some schools which have problems of having students. There are some. Is it because of what I just said? Or is it because of the fact that they still want to maintain the boycott? I believe the issue of boycott is of the past. But there's other factors which have come in to make those things very difficult. Because it is not easy to pay school fees 3 times.
All right.
I bet you.
Okay. Now, the Anglophone crisis, Senior Barrister Achu Julius, there are about 3 or 4 groups of persons. You have one on the other side, those who have been brandished secessionists. You have 2 federalists. You have 3, those who are for national unity. You have 4, those who are calling for the decentralization. Where do you stand?
I'm in for decentralization. First of all, I'm in for decentralization. And to me, the approach is very different. We know when you talk about Anglophone issue, it is not about the form of government which is the issue. It is about marginalization. It is about how we share the national cake. Don't forget, don't mix words. Everything it has to do with the economy. You see, we Anglophones feel that the economic structure of the Cameroon, of the country, doesn't permit us to come out. For example, we were promised a ring road in Bamenda more than 20 years ago. It's not yet done. The road from Babaju to Bamenda had a problem, though they're taking care of it now, which is good. So you see, because of that, Anglophones have a problem of coming out in the country or feeling comfortable in the country. Now, if you notice, there's been a lot of exodus from the Anglophone zone to the Francophone zone because economically, the Francophone zone is more viable than the Anglophone zone, and that explains why most of us are this way. So when we come this way, I will turn and look back and say, look, I cannot be feeling comfortable when I know that there are people there over there in the Anglophone zone who are also not comfortable. So
can this give reason for the outing of Mancho BBC? Can you give him reasons today when he said there were poor roads network, lack of social amenities in the northwest region?
No, the problem of Mancho BBC is the fact that he started a movement which was very courageous and good about roads in the northwest province, especially Bamenda town. But at one point in time, he transformed himself from civil society civil society activists into a politician. Because you will notice that when people like Honorable Weber got on the pole with our politics, he too joined. He joined the secessionist movement. I was talking Southern Cameroon and things like that. So he got himself involved in politics. And that's why he's where he is. You see, once you want to hit the drum, you're sure that people will dance. And if everybody doesn't dance, it means there's a problem. Be careful of those who don't dance, you dance. Anything can happen. And on the political front, I always say politics has nothing to do with truth or lies. Politics is a game. If you get involved in it, you should be ready for the consequences. That's where I think Bancho Baby's problem is. He moved from a normal civil activity, which to me I had to, into politics, and that's where he couldn't differentiate between the two. He got himself into this mess.
Now you are for decentralization, but in 2015, common law lawyers assembled in Bamenda and came out with a document which was channeled to the head of state, Paul Biya. The common law lawyers were in favor of a return to a federal state. That's federalism in Cameroon. Between decentralization and federalism, many say they are almost similar. So if you are for decentralization, which seems to have failed in Cameroon since the inception in 1996, many say, why not try federalism?
To me, I don't buy into federalism because I've noticed around the world that most countries who live in a federation are not better off than countries who live in a decentralized system. If you go to Kenya, you go to Tanzania, you go to Ghana, which are decentralized states, you realize that it is functioning very well.
They are calling only African countries.
Because I can't compare ourselves.
European countries.
Why we can never compare ourselves to European countries, because the standards and yardsticks of those things are different.
Nigeria too is very well.
Okay, you see what's going on in Nigeria? It's almost they are fighting to break off. That's why you see the southeast is fighting, the north is fighting, and so on. So there's total confusion because of it. Everybody thinks that they are strong enough to be on their own, but meanwhile the country is supposed to be a whole, one whole, which is divergence, and everybody is trying to live together in harmony. But once you go into federation, most governors can be very powerful, and the governor can decide that, look, I'm strong enough, I want to leave, and that brings in a different way of looking at things. The rest of the country now want to fight them, and just imagine what happened during the Biafra War. Is it worth killing people because of you want to have an entity which is yours? Is it worth it? Is it worth that people should die? I don't think so. We have a Cameroon we've been living in peace for the past 50 years or so, which has been our major capital, because the major capital is the peace that we'll be having. If you go around Africa, everyone likes to live. Whenever I send somebody to Cameroon, they doesn't like to leave because of the peace that we have.
Peace in Cameroon has been the absence of war, because other areas like the
not necessarily. I will live in Nigeria. After 6 o'clock, everybody rushes to go back home. Is there war there? We don't have that here. You find people out in Cameroon till 5 in the morning. You will hardly find that in some countries. You hardly find that people live their lives normally in the dark, in the night, and without fear of anything. It's only in countries like Cameroon that you see it. There are very few countries that have that. It's because of the peace that we have. So because of the peace that we have, our forces of law and order are taking care of the security. When you start a war, everybody moves towards the war front, and you leave the poor citizen on his own. Because there are not enough people to take care of the peace in the various cities, because there's a war. But you see, peace is only when there's a war. Peace is when you and me agree to live together and accept your defaults and you accept mine. That's why we've been having that for the past 50 years. If you notice, when our forefathers were bringing this country together, they were no friends. But I can bet you some of you have a lot of Francophone friends now, with whom you exchange ideas and words. So what they say affects your life, and what you tell them affects their life. So with time, as time is going on, we feel as if we are brothers, unlike our parents, who were not very close to each other, who actually did something good by bringing us together. I don't see why we should put the goal asunder now, because our forefathers had a vision. It is high time we sit down and think as Cameroonians. Well, if we want to go back to federation, it means we are turning the tables. We are not progressing. We are digressing to me. We are going back to the old state of affairs, which to me is going to create more problems than solve them.
Okay, we are still within the context of the Anglophone crisis. You're watching The Insight on Equinox Television. My guest tonight is Senior Barrister Achu Julius. He is a lead counsel for some of the victims of the Anglophone crisis. Now, Barrister, the international crisis group, just like many other international organizations, reacted as far as the September 22nd and October 1 incidents in the two English-speaking regions of Cameroon were concerned. The International Crisis Group actually indicted the government for some of the massive killings. The crisis group equally called on the leaders of the two English-speaking regions of Cameroon, those who have been leading some of the strike action, to also restrain from using violence. Now, the reaction of Issa Chiroma Bakari, the Minister for Communication, many say he went too far by saying that the International Crisis Group is persona non grata in Cameroon.
Oh, he has said what he said. He's the Minister of Communication, so he knows what he's saying. But to me, International Crisis Group means for that NGO to survive the Mali crisis. So what I see is that whenever there's a beginning of crisis, they are the ones who find it for it to become a real crisis to justify their existence. Because I was surprised to hear that despite all what they've said, they never went towards the government to find out the government's position on this issue. Because I followed Minister Yusuf Chiroma, who said it clearly that he's surprised that his Minister of Communication, they never came to him. So normally, ordinarily, you as a foreign NGO living in Cameroon, if you want to put up a story or a report, you must get the facts from all the sides. So you get the fact only from one side, it means you are biased. And that bias is because they want to fund the crisis to become a real crisis, because as of date, it's not a real crisis. For them to survive or exist, there should be a real crisis.
But they equally condemn the people who are funding violence in the two English-speaking regions.
They are condemning people like who? Who are they to condemn anybody? They are supposed to come and give their opinion and see what's going on. And are they coming from heaven? Or are they part of the United Nations? It is just an NGO. Why do you condemn somebody? Especially when you don't even do investigation to find out what happened. You are not God. You are just if you are an opinion leader, you give your opinion and don't make as if what you say is true all the time. I can tell you that if you go back, you as a journalist, you go and check it out. Check out that story. You find a lot of loopholes in it. It's not meant for to tell you, but I know you look at the report, there should be a lot of loopholes. Because just the mere fact that their stories come from one side, it can never be right. Because no matter how the other side is supposed to be heard. Whenever there are two, it takes two to tango, not just one person. It's not a one-man issue. And that makes me to believe that what the minister said, this group has been meant as a pressure group for certain issues. If we in Africa will continue to follow the way they are doing things, we are in for a lot of trouble in the future. We have to be very careful. We can solve African problems in Africa. We don't need those groups to solve our problems or to tell us how our problems are being carried out or how it's being done.
You don't need Amnesty International. You don't need International Crisis Group.
For what?
You don't need Human Rights Watch. Because many believe that if a government like us pushes away such groups, there will be a lot of human rights violation. Don't you see that at times it is good to have some of these reports from international bodies like this to also caution the government against human rights? Look at what happened on September 22 and October 1. You bear with me that many persons died in the two English-speaking regions of Cameroon. Can we say, you as a lawyer, it was a human rights violation to have used live bullets on the citizens?
I'm not a judge of issues. I don't want to be judging people to say if this man is right or this man is wrong or whatever. But I have always been of the opinion that the way this thing was planned, Oktoberfest may be noble cause, they'll be good. Fighting to have an independent country may be a good idea. But the way it's being done is being done. The end of the day, who will suffer is the poor man on the street. That's the place I've been fighting for. They don't want to listen to me. Because you can't tell me that. You say, okay, we have taken we're commemorating our independence. You say your president will be landing at Tico Airport with their troops, Amber Liberation Forces. You ask that population should go and arrest administrative officials, arrest military people, and lock them up at the chief palaces, and the chiefs to take over in the various administrative units as a head. And you think that will succeed? Taking people in harm's way. Because how can you come and arrest the policeman? Because the military man knows that you have received instructions to arrest them. You come arrest me, go and lock me in palace, and allow you to have a gun you don't have. What are the consequences?
But does that give the right to shoot?
It's not a matter of right. Arrest it, that didn't give the right to shoot. But normally, the military are supposed to be trained to handle civilians in a particular way without using unnecessary force. Let me put it that way. When bullets unnecessary force, they are trained in such a way that they can always handle the civilian population without using unnecessary force. It's possible. So, but once you come and see they start using guns, then there's a problem somewhere. When they start using live ammunition in the population, then there's a problem somewhere. Because I know that whenever there is such an issue, who is going to suffer is a common man. But all those guys who said we are coming to land at Tico Airport with our troops, promised that they'll march to Boya with troops ready to defend the population was deceived. They believed that was going to be true. But I knew that it cannot be possible, because what will happen is that this same population, because the population is an unruly horse, you can push it the way you like if you are intelligent. So the success in pushing the population to follow what they're saying, not knowing that the consequences of what the police is doing is what's happening now. And you know, when they send out the army on such issues, there are a lot of things that come along with it, in such a way that there's what we always call collateral damage. Because the real persons who are ordering all of these issues are not around. They're not in the country. They order the other young men in the streets and the poor population to come out. They themselves are not even here. And when once like that, there's this collateral damage, it's the population that suffers. That is what some of us have been fighting for. I'm not fighting for the fact you want to change. You want to change the form of government. To me, you must first of all win elections. You must have the majority in parliament before you can change the form of the government. But once you change the form of government by using what the method they're using, it's going to punish the population. Because those who want to change the government, first of all, are not here. They've never had an elections anywhere in their life in Cameroon. But their things are good in their internet kings. They have the availability or accessibility to internet or whatever. They're pushing the young population to come out to be hurt. And that's what's going on. It's whenever people are killed, it's always a very sad event. I will never vouch for such a thing. But if I have to send the population out or send people out to go and face the military, I will send them out to it. I send them ready to face what they're going to see on the ground. I will not ask people to move with palm fronts and be shouting with stones and shooting at people.
Are you proposing they will have sent them too with guns?
If you think that you are powerful enough, that's where you're supposed to go to. If you are not powerful enough to go to, don't even dare. That's what I'm saying. Don't even dare. Because if you dare, who suffers? It's not even you, because you're not even here. It's that common man on the street who knows nothing about the intricacies of politics, what can happen, who will suffer at the end of the day. And secondly, I still believe that when once a military man hurts you, you have a right to complain. You have a right to complain. I've always said I'm open. Anybody who thinks that he suffers a loss and I can identify the branch of the military that hurts him, I'm going to take on the case against the military people. There are so many lawyers who have said will not refuse. But nobody, when once you get hurt, instead of coming to defend your rights as a citizen of this country, most people shy away. What do you want us to do? What do you want people to do?
But what explains the fact that the government has not yet condemned the killings by the military?
No, the government, even the head of state in his message said he condemns everything that was violent from any side.
What side? Is it not escaping? Is it not escaping what the military?
No,
that's the same.
The head of state has said it all.
The same what we saw in the he condemned violence on both sides.
Yes, but you see, when you get hurt, right? For example, I'm defending victims of this crisis who were hurt. They complained. If you don't complain, how can somebody defend you? You have to go and get a lawyer or go to the state council to complain that this gendarmerie unit or this police unit or whatever did this to me and this is what happened, and show it. But everybody shies away. What do you expect? What do you expect? In some countries, they will never leave. Look at what is happening. A military man dies even in Niger, in the US. It is, even the head of state is shaken. It's because there are people behind it complaining that it's not correct. If we don't do that here, we don't defend our rights. We allow it and so blame. Everybody blames the government, blames the government. But meanwhile, your rights are your rights. You infringe your mind and make sure I take you to court. Let the court do its job. But I'm taking you to court. Even if there's some favoritism or whatever, I must have taken you to court, and you next time you understand that I won't do this, I shouldn't do this again. But we don't do that. When they do it, we allow it. Look, for example, lawyers were molested
in Boya. On the 11th of October.
I hope as lawyers, I think they must have complained. But I'm sure they must have complained. They should be investing going on. And even if it's not going on, they were supposed to follow up to make sure it's going on.
You promised me once that you were ready to take up the case.
If I don't have a client, it's not for me to go out and look for a client. It's for a client to look for a lawyer. We don't do touting. Touting is not correct. It's unofficial. Touting is illegal in Cameroon. Where you go and look for clients, it is illegal. But I know there are lawyers who will be ready to take on them. The client just needs to consult one of them. Anyway, the thing happened in Boya. Douala said it may be difficult for a guy in Boya to come and consult me here, but there are lawyers in Boya. Why can't I consult them?
All right. Okay, today, Barrister Achu Julius, what will be the problem to the Anglophone crisis, the solution rather to the Anglophone crisis that has been persisting now for 1 year? If you were given the chance to advise the two sides, what will you say?
The first thing, I've always said that for the past 2-3 years, that the issue is not that there's some hatred amongst Cameroonians. That's out of question. The issue is that we Anglophones feel that there's so much in this country reserved only for Francophones. And when we have that feeling, it's normal that we express this resentment. But expressing resentment doesn't mean we should go against the institution of the country. Present them normally. Like if I want someone head of state, I'll write to him a very polite letter, putting in strong and nice words to make him accept it.
But these things were presented by teachers and lawyers. Minister said there was no problem.
Look, if you write to the head of state and you publish it in a newspaper, you are not serious. He will never read it. Even if you are head of state, a private letter written to you is published. Why will you take the person serious any longer? It is as if you want to tell him how to rule a country. Meanwhile, he was elected. What head of state was elected? It means they gave him a mandate to rule the country for a certain period of time, which is normal. And it's not for you to come again, an individual, a group of persons, you come and tell him how to run the country. If you have a complaint, write to him. Ask for it, that it should be solved. It will resolve. Answer the problem that you have to be resolved. He will do it. But once you write that letter and go and publish it in the newspaper, for it to be common knowledge, you defeated the purpose. To me, I feel that's the problem. When it comes to all the complaints that the lawyers applied for, most of them have been granted. When it comes to that, especially that, except when it comes to the issue of politics, because to me, it's not the role of a lawyer to use the institution as the legal institution, the lawyer's institution, to change the form of government. No. You must go to the ballot box. So maybe that side of it has never been touched, it's true, but the rest of it has been touched. At least certain aspects of it have been taken care of by the government. So instead of coming in to make it look better, we decide to accept what has been done and continue asking for more. Like the hungry boy in Oliver Twist, I want some more. But you see, when you want some more, you don't clash with institutions. You come in right through the right door, the right corridor. That's what you are supposed to do. But you see, so when it comes to the issues from the other side, I believe that the problem is the approach. To me, the approach was too brutal, and the government had to come out strong, because it was as if they put the government on its knees. The government never goes on its knees. And once you are at that stage, if you are someone who is intelligent, you have to stop and revisit your strategy. Secondly, when once lawyers organize a strike, it is inappropriate to organize a strike for an indeterminate period of time, because it's like you are some sort of giving an injunction to a government that if it's not this, we're out. You don't do that. Because you have to, when you organize a strike, it has to be a period of time. At that time, you come across, you loud sit back and look into what happened and try to see how you can go ahead or you can stop or give it some time or whatever. For instance, I was waiting that all those associations will sit down and a group as they used to sit and look into what has gone on so far, go into training, into introspection, check, see what has been done and what has not been done, or see where the government has gone wrong or gone right, or see where you yourself have gone wrong or gone right. Take stock. And from that stock, you can know what to do next, which will be better for everybody. But it's still not been done. You see, there's still problems going on. Somebody says the president of the bar, the common law bar, somebody says what this man's design is wrong and so on and so on. It's still that same confusion and cacophony.
So what should be done
So,
now?
to me, as I've been saying for the past 3 years, on the side of the government, is the issue of balancing our administrative and political setup. In the sense that I always say this, I've not seen why there are some ministerial positions which are reserved only for francophones. Meanwhile, from the very beginning, they came with the idea that between entities, things are evolving. But at least we need to have some consideration to make sure of us feel that we are part and parcel of the society of this country. If we don't, if the government doesn't do that, this thing will still continue. It will continue, and it may be really different or difficult, more complicated in the years ahead.
So you are
so I'm
already asking the head of state to make a cabinet reshuffle, maybe in the days ahead.
Sure,
an inclusive one at the top, like Ministry of Defense,
yes,
Finance,
Police, the administration, Foreign Affairs, in the Secretary of Presidency and things like that. Make it such. Let's let the common man feel that, common Anglophone feel that he's part and parcel of the country. But if there's that gap, between them up there and those down there, there's going to be a problem. Because let me not tell you, if you are not a minister with a portfolio, it's difficult for you to help your people behind you. They see you as a minister, they don't understand why the Jews can't flow their way. Meanwhile, you're up there. It's because you don't have a portfolio.
Anglophones have just one minister with a portfolio. Minister of Forestry and Wildlife.
You see, and that's the type of things. When you think about it, they're not very happy. Because that's the only person who can actually influence the life of these people down there. Well, he has a possibility. I'm sure he must have done it, because I know the guy is a gentleman. He must have done it. He's very quiet and very serious gentleman. He's done it. But the rest, we can't do it. We can't feel it. Look at it this way too, that the issue of language, it's high time we start now controlling or regulating this issue of communication. We can't have an army that speaks only French. We can't have a police force or gendarme force that speaks only French. If you want to write the exam, you don't know much about French, you are going to be in trouble, because at the end of the day, when you come out from the school or whatever, you are forced to communicate only in French. It's difficult. It's going to be complicated for Anglophones. So when they see all of those things, they don't find it fair. You see, at the same time too, when you send administrators, because I hear that you go to the judicial police offices at times, the police officer or whatever takes your statement, I can always speak in French. It's not fair. It's not correct. Those are the type of things that have to be done to make sure the population feels the impact of the government on the ground. One thing we should understand is that we will not say that there are a lot of Anglophones in the system. If you see the group that left Yaoundé to go and do the so-called appeasement, there are a lot of Anglophones who are working in the system. They are there. But why don't they use them? Are they not competent enough? Why can our Prime Minister, who I know is a very competent person, have the same powers like Ayato, Prime Minister used to have, and things like that? So it is those little things that when people look at it, they feel that, are we really part of this country? They ask that question. Me as a lawyer, okay, I'm a liberal person, I'm on my own, so I don't have the same type of problems as some of the common Anglophone man. The common man, the guy who rides even the bike, don't put it that way. They cannot see it the way I see it, but he has that feeling. He should have that feeling that, look, when he looks around, there's nothing he can do. He doesn't feel he's part of this country, and the next thing is move out. That explains why we have a lot of Cameroonians out of this country, because they don't feel they're part and parcel of this country. And you know, another thing is that, as I said, I noticed that most of the Anglos who were in civil service left out of frustration, because you cannot be there career-wise, you'll be there for 10, 15 years. A young man who just comes from ENAM, after 2 years, is made their boss. So is it because he's francophone? You feel frustrated. And I know of many people have left the country because of this frustration. So those things should be looked into. And it is only the government that can look into sort this part of it. Though the population has its own part to play, the government has a part to play.
Okay. All right, you're watching the Insight on Equinox Television. Now, let's move over to the extraordinary CEMAC Summit that will be coming up in 2 days' time. That will be in Chad. Why do you think that most of the countries in the Central African sub-region, or the CEMAC region, decided to sign the free circulation of goods and persons within 1 month? We've seen about 3 countries who have done so. And these are countries that were resisting to sign this.
I believe, first of all, they've come to realize that for us to have a really strong economic union, we should be brothers and friends. I should meet a Gabonese and say, this is my brother. I should meet a Equatorial Guinea and say, this is my brother. This is my friend. And I'm happy living with him. Those barriers that used to block the free movement of persons caused this rift amongst us. Because whether you like it or not, there was no harmony when it comes to our countries. Just take, for example, when I used to play football. It was like some sort of a little word that didn't actually, which was nowhere spelled out. It's because we're not friends. And I don't have a friend who's a Gabonese. I have a friend who's a Equatorial Guinean. We are like brothers. Who used to be consul general here. He was an ambassador somewhere else here. But you see, that thing is going to permit us to have friends. When once we become friends, it will be easier for us now to take decisions that should have a common effect. And I know one of the major things that we have is this issue of currency. We have to look at it, because we are subjugated to a friend in another country, which is not fair. We cannot be a union like this, and we are subjected. Our money, the money we use, our legal tender, is subject to the control of another country. It's not fair. It's not correct. Economic-wise, whether we like it or not, we cannot justify that. It's just making us a slave all our lives.
There are some analysts who hold that these countries quickly signed the free circulation of goods and persons because of the drop in petroleum prices. Their economies now are dwindling to a metrical. They now have to gain from others. So at first, they never wanted persons from other countries to move into their country because they were enjoying, their economy was booming and they were enjoying, and now that their economies are down, they now want free circulation of goods and persons. How can you react to that?
I don't want to share that view, because
a country like Gabon and Equatorial Guinea, we know so well how it has been very difficult to move into these countries.
Yes, I don't want to share that view, because I like to look at economics at the level of the macro level, not the micro. They've come to realize that they allow persons from other economic zones to come into their zone, work in their countries, and they carry the foreign currency out. Meanwhile, if this currency was circulating only in the CEMAC, we should have been better off. Even they should have been better off. That's the macroeconomics of it. That's the way I look at it. Because if I take money from Gabon, I come to Gabon, the next thing is I might buy food and go back to Gabon to sell. So the money will be moving around and around. It's only within the area. It's going to affect our growth, our economic growth, and things like that. So, but if that money, you give it only to the Frenchman who has the farm, like Cote d'Ivoire, who has the truck, who only hires out the trucks, who owns the economy, every money, everything that you make leaves the country. It doesn't stay there. And at the end of the day, the economy is going to suffer. I'm sure that's the reason that they've seen. So when they do that now, we are going to be stronger as one economic unit. And why not? With the nearest future, that's why we can talk about a common currency. Because we now circulate amongst ourselves. We don't send the money out of the country, out of our own zone.
Okay. Now, from the CEMAC, since we are almost in news out of Cameroon, discussing things out of Cameroon, let's talk Kenya, where Uhuru Kenyatta, he has been re-elected as the president of Kenya after Raila Odinga withdrew from the rerun elections. He says, just like when I've been complaining in Cameroon, that it was not free and fair election, the Electoral Commission, which seems to be in disarray today.
To me, Raila, to me, is a poor loser. He should have been a kingmaker if he agreed on what happened. You see, when once God created man, it's not everybody who can be a leader. Because to be a leader, God must give you the support. He has gone to elections 5 times on the same rules without any change. Why should the 5th time be very different? If you know that the rules of a game, the rules are not good enough for you, why go for the game? And when you're going for the game, means you're a sportsman. So you should be sportsman enough to accept the errors, to accept the weaknesses, because you've decided to accept the rules as they are. I don't see why you should allow that Kenyan to be killed because he wants to be president at all costs. I don't see why you should allow what is going on, because Kenya is a very good country, very nice country. That leaves a lot on tourism. So it means the social uprising and chaos, the tourism industry we're going to die. And that will mean affecting the economy of the country. And who will suffer? The common man. Because they themselves, they are very rich guys, they're up there, they are fine. The common man, anyway, they don't even think about that common man. That if I allow rebellion to go on, or trouble, social unrest, what are the consequences? People are going to die. Is it worth it? I remember the elections in Nigeria. Goodluck Jonathan, even before the elections were declared, considered, because he saw trouble coming. He said, I know to him, he said, the life of a Nigerian is worth hundreds of presidentship. And then I said, look, rather than there be chaos, because I'm the one organizing the election, I was president, and let there be dissension or social unrest, I concede. He considered him before the results were ever published. Okay, in Kenya, Raila went to court, and the court decided otherwise, that he should fix another day within 60 days. Instead, to me, I thought he should have gone back to court to ask for directives. What does that mean? Does that mean the electoral commission should be changed or not, or whatever? To the best of my knowledge, they never went back to court to get some direction, because whenever there's a judgment and the issues which are not understood, you can go back to the same court to ask for interpretation. What does this mean? He never went for things like that. And the court said they should election within 60 days organized by the same commission. You're happy that you won the verdict. So instead of now following the rules that all of us have agreed, because the commission, the judgment never said the commission will be changed, you decided to boycott. And when you boycott, you send boys on the street to cause all the brouhaha, which cause the confusion and the trouble and the killings that are going on, because the police will not take it lightly. Because you had agreed on the rules, you won the matter, and everything. The judge, the Supreme Court said, this is what should happen, this election within 60 days. And within 60 days, you say you're going to boycott. To me, he's a very poor loser, a bad loser. And Kenya doesn't merit what is going on. That notwithstanding, elections went on. And Uhuru, from what Uhuru Kenyatta won by, I think, 90-something% of vote.
About 95%.
Except for 4 counties that the voting was postponed for today.
For Saturday.
But it goes without saying that the Kenyans want Uhuru to be their president. If I was Raila, I should have met Uhuru to renegotiate the position of opposition leader with all the prerogatives that he takes and prepare for next elections. God has said Raila will be a kingmaker and not a king. Because after 5 elections, I still want to insist there's something wrong. He should have backed out and put some other person in it. And I'm sure that person will be much better than him. I'm sure that's a message the Kenyan people are sending to him, that look, you can be a kingmaker but not a king.
Okay. Now, before we go, there is this disturbing situation on the series of road accidents in Cameroon. We are coming back to the country before we end this program. A series of road accidents in the country. We saw the latest one, General Voyage, which had an accident and about 15 persons died. That was last Monday. Now, the Minister for Transport withdrew the license of the driver for 1 year and suspended General Voyage for 3 months. In about 10 months, the travel agency has caused about 6 accidents and about 60 lives lost. now between the withdrawal or the suspension for 3 months and the dozens of persons who will be jobless? Which one is better?
The devil's alternative. Whichever you go, man would die. You see, our problem in this country is this issue of running a country for 1 year. Most of our projects are meant to fit within a financial year. So it is difficult to see into the near future. Because the near future is in 10 years today. How can we imagine that in Cameroon, between Douala and Yaoundé, there is no real autoroute? What they call dual carriage or heavy duty carriage. How can you imagine that? How can you imagine that in this country we are still living in the dark ages, in the sense that our roads are meant only for two lanes, one going, one coming? It is important, though it is still bad. To me, it's a bad direction we are going to. It's high time we start making these roads bigger and broader. First thing. Secondly, we have an issue of human error, because most of these accidents are due to human error. I believe that some of those drivers either are not well trained, or they are not very happy with the situation they have in their companies. And you know, when once such persons are not happy, anything that happens, they don't give a damn, because first of all, the boss is not theirs, and secondly, those who are going to die, most of them are not them. We have to, it's high time we cross-check the capacity of those who are driving to see if they are capable of driving at the times that they drive. Because I'm very sure that there's no control of the capacity to see or vision of these drivers in the night. Ordinarily, the Ministry of Transport should have installed a system whereby every week all these drivers, they go to an eye specialist to come out with a report that their eyesight are good enough to drive. For all these drivers that make, because it's human error, the major cause of these accidents, that they want. So all what the government is doing is control them, make sure that their sights are good enough to drive, especially in the night, because not everybody can drive in the night. When you drive in the night, the on-light coming usually blinds you. If you're not used to it, you're going to have problems. Anything can happen. So we don't have that type of control. Then secondly, most drivers, especially these heavy-duty trucks and buses, they are not very polite. They don't have a sense of, the humane sense of interacting with or behaving on the way as if the older person coming is a brother of yours. If you see the way they drive on that road at times, you have to ask yourself, hey, are we brothers in the same country? You see, especially this truck and bus driver, the way they drive on the road, you are usually exclaimed, you are on saying, hey, what's going on here? It means these guys have a problem of civic education. They have never been taught to handle their job in a particular way that is useful for the society, rather than it being negative. They were supposed to be trained on civic education. In some countries, just a bike rider, to be a bike rider, you must wear a coat and a tie. Just that coat and a tie gives you a sense of being responsible. But look at what is happening now. These riders, when once anything happens, it starts by insulting you. Doesn't even look at where the problem came from. It doesn't matter. His first problem is instead of insult you and tell you off and call your mother names, call you names and whatever. These truck drivers have the same habit. They do the same thing. The bus drivers the same thing. And that's why it is where the ministry has to come in to stop all of that. If we don't do it, these accidents will continue. If we don't take care of the roads, if we don't take care of the capacity of those driving, these things will continue. I don't want to blame only General, because General maybe is unfortunate as to be the only one who is always having all of these problems. But there's that duty of the government to ensure that that human factor has been taken care of. When you talk about social unrest and the like, I would prefer to preserve the lives of Cameroonians and think of employing 100 people. It's not worth it. If you think you're going to be killing people all the time, you better don't work. You better close up the company and let people don't work. I would prefer to preserve the lives of Cambodians all the time, even if anybody has to lose his job. So I don't even blame the government for suspending that agency and for suspending that driver.
All right. Okay. We've come to the end of the program. Senior Barrister Achu Julius, it was a pleasure being with you tonight.
It's mine. It's really mine when I come here. I'm happy being with you too.
Yes, it was equally a pleasure being with you in tonight's edition of the program, The Insight on Equinox Television. Thanks for watching. If you did enjoy the program, take our rendezvous there for next week Sunday, same time, 6:30 p.m., same channel, Equinox Television. Good night.